and welcome to News and Views. I'm John Banville. Our guest this week is Senator Joe Robach. Senator Robach, thank you very much for being here.
Great to have the opportunity, John, to talk about what I always continue to say, important work here in the Capitol that's going to certainly have an impact on people's lives as we move forward.
Well, one of the biggest things that is happening during our entire legislative session happened last week. You finalized the state budget. And I know that this is a very important document that really drives the economic engine of New York State. And I know that this has also been a very important issue to you personally. I mean, I know that you've put in legislation to make sure that the budget is done in a timely manner and that we do the right thing for the taxpayers of New York.
Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about what was in this state budget and what it means to our community?
Sure. Well, I always give the overview. You know, you're right in your comments that I always say I have a lot of energy left, and I don't feel that old, but I've been around long enough where it was very frustrating to me, and I believe most of my constituents, when that New York City mentality would be prevalent, that they would constantly say, even publicly, which always shocked me, that the timeliness of the budget is inconsequential, only them getting what they wanted, or the content was all that mattered. I never shared that, and that's not the work ethic my parents taught me. I also heard throughout my district that, you know, people said, we have to go to work and be on time, so should the legislature, and I shared that, and we've done everything from put bills in to sequester the legislature. But I could say now, for the sixth year in a row, the good news is we've had a budget on time. There's still some dialogue of the amount of transparency, but use conference committees and other things that I think are definitely a step in the right direction. And by the governor, quite frankly, leading the charge and getting the assembly to come to the table, he has completely embraced many of the ideas, not only a timely budget, but living within our means, the cap, and embraced the upstate Republican ideas that have really led to some fiscal sanity. So I could say, before we get to the specifics of what's in the budget, that for the sixth year in a row now, we've had a budget on time. So people know what they're going to get. School districts know what they're going to get. Not-for-profits don't have to wait for funding. And it's really, again, restored some fiscal sanity as well as operational sanity, where people don't have to do any guesswork. And early on in my career, it wasn't that way. So I do think that's definitely a step in the right direction and something I believe most of my constituents will be glad happened.
One of the hot topics during the budget negotiations was the upstate, downstate parity for transportation. Now, many of our viewers know that you are chairman of the Transportation Committee, a very important committee up here, and it was also really the focal point of making sure that upstate didn't get hurt.
Correct.
Can you tell us how this all, how did upstate fare in this situation, and how do you feel about it?
Absolutely. So I always care about parity, and I've been pretty outspoken sometimes to the chagrin or disappointment of my New York City colleagues when I get very excited about pointing out inequities, because many times they seem to say, when it's policy that's good for them, we're all one state, but when we're on the short end of the stick, I don't see that courtesy returned. So whenever we have an opportunity to adjust that, and in this year's budget we did in two places in particular, both school aid funding and roads and bridges, we were able to get that parity, which I was very happy of. I've always felt very strongly about that, but certainly after recently being named the transportation chair, that came something that was really under my purview to negotiate through the budget process. So to roll it back up to 8-9, when my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, were in control of all three houses, being in the majority and having the governor, when they broke that parity, which was very upsetting to me, and certainly resulted in less money being spent on roads and bridges, not only in New York City, but especially in upstate New York as well, we can. And what had always transpired up to that time was whatever the Metropolitan Transit Authority got for their long-range plan, an equal amount of money went into roads and bridges. And as I pointed out to my downstate colleagues who almost seem to be against that parity, a big chunk of that money goes to New York City and downstate New York as well. They have many roads and bridges. But certainly for us in upstate New York, taking the subway is not an option. We drive our kids to school, we go to worship, we get to work. More importantly, we get to our medical appointments all by driving. So the road conditions are not only important to us for safe travel, but are equally important for economic development and everything we do in life. So this year, I'm very, very happy to say, and I applaud all the people in the construction field, general contractors, local governments, highway superintendents, even other local government people, chambers of commerce, who came, supported us, came to press conferences, spoke out and said, parity is not only important for putting people to work on roads, but we need that. We've kicked the can down the road, and from a point of fairness, we should have that. I had a lot of people supporting my position this year and was very happy that in the final negotiations, we are going to have actually not a 5-year plan, but a 6-year plan where both the MTA and Roads and Bridges, Thruway Authority, other entities will each be getting $27 billion over those 6 years. So it's a lot of money. We have language in there to make sure the governor is going to get the money out the door and live up to the pledge in the first year. And that's going to allow us to get roads and bridges in a lot better shape than they are today. And certainly we all know they need that. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to expedite a couple projects in the Rochester area, again, that are very much needed for better business travel, safe flow, people's commutes to work. I've said to the governor time and time again that you talked about the importance of Tappan Zee Bridge. When the 390-490 interchange in Rochester, more people go through that every day than go over that bridge. So when you look at it in terms of scale, very, very important to us. I get the governor's connecting upstate to downstate, the symbolic issues associated with the Tappan Zee Bridge, but in real pragmatic transportation need, we have every right to expect that and want to get that. So the chances are much, much greater that, I should say chances, that money will really be there. We'll be looking at all local plans and see what we can implement in the DOT plans on a year-to-year basis now, but the funding will be in place. Parity's been restored, and I think that's great news for the people all across the state, but especially in upstate New York. I have nothing against the subway system in New York City. It is amazing how many people they move, but if we are all one state, then it's critically important that we meet the needs of the 45% of the population that's not in New York City, that's across our great state. And this year, we were able to do it. I was happy to lead the charge that in the conference committees and the budget negotiations. Very good. And I just mentioned one other thing too, not to beat it. We also made sure, which my friends in local government will like, that in addition to this CHIPS funding, which helps local roads be maintained, we not only increased that category separately, but there was 2 programs called the Bridge Program and the PAVE Program, where we've taken that money and run it through the formula similar to CHIPS. So there'll be more local autonomy, and local governments can decide how they're going to use that money to address a portion of their need, where we try to work collaboratively with cities, counties, to meet the global need of all people who are on our roads and bridges, because we know they're all important. So that happened too. So in the transportation area, I was really pleased with the final outcome of the budget.
Well, it's always good to have a victory that means a lot to basically roads and safety for your constituents. I mean, it doesn't get much more basic than that.
No.
But while we're talking about basic things, let's talk about education. How did education fare in this year's state budget?
I could say this, that I know there's a tremendous amount of need out there, and we're working on a lot of other things, but because we were able to do, again, when my Democratic colleagues were in control, they held New York City harmless, cut a lot of high-performing school districts, as well as suburban school districts in upstate New York. We eliminated the gap elimination. So every district that I represent all 6, all got an increase of 6% or greater, some as high as 11 or 12%, all numbers being told. So I think globally we could say this was a good year for education, and was glad that we ended that gap created by my Democratic colleagues, driven by New York City again, and restored some fairness and did a record number, a record amount of funding to K through 12 education. We could spend a whole show talking about the complexities of the formula, but overall, that was pretty good. And I'd throw in real quickly too, we were able to put $1 billion into the tuition assistance program, keeping higher ed affordable and accessible, and SUNY tuition was froze for this year, so there'll be no increase there for those people choosing our great SUNY system and in public school higher education option. So I thought those were good things in education as well.
Well, outstanding. Well, it builds. I mean, education, you need to go to college now, you know, that's
Sure.
in order to get a job. One of the most hotly debated topics in this year's state budget was the minimum wage. Can you tell our viewers, at the end of the day, what happened with that?
Sure. So, you know, the governor's gone around and touted his driving, good or bad, of a $15 minimum wage. I could say very expeditiously, while I wanted working men and women, especially adults working in those fields, and if they don't really have a career path out, to be making, there's some merit to certainly both equity, fairness, wanting to know you can make a little bit more money, and hopefully making enough money where you can be self-sustaining and not relying on other government forms as well. But many of us, and I included, felt that while $15 potentially, in time will tell if it'll work in New York City, would have been way too much money for upstate New York to take. So we did two things. We made it $12.50, and we spread it out over 5.5 years for upstate New York. I think there's a wide range of opinion on this, but certainly I felt this was a much better position than what the governor proposed. People will have time to phase this in. People will be able to earn a little bit more money. And for lack of a better term, now we can say, yes, we did give them an increase, but more a rate of inflation increase to when the federal government implemented the minimum wage. And so I think that'll make that a little bit easier all across the board. But again, not turning our backs on the requests of many of those people that want to do that. And I would point this out because I think this is equally as important. We also spend a lot of money in workforce development, job training, because besides a minimum wage, we want to make sure we have career paths for people. Government can't artificially do it. You really have to have career paths where people can earn money and support their family for a lifetime. So we came to that compromise. So a lot of people are still erroneously thinking that there's a $15 upstate minimum wage. That's not accurate. New York City's going to have it phased in over a 3-year time period. Long Island's going to have a 15 minimum wage phased in. So we tried to make it on some geography. So while some people will earn more money, we want to make sure the person working next to them wasn't going to lose their job to allow that to happen.
One of the other issues was paid family leave. Can you tell us how that was resolved in the state?
Sure. Very quickly, paid family leave is a program that's being created which will be somewhat employer funded, almost like an insurance program, but we knew that some people who have to take emergency leave with transient populations now, people not always, living in close proximity to their mom, dad, family members, we know there's a need for that, both for women having children as well as dealing with illnesses. We've now set up a program which will be funded by employees, but people can get a portion of their salary, not all of it, approximately 50 to 60%, depending on how long they've been working, and get that done at no cost virtually to the employers, and now have paid family leave, not unpaid family leave, and have their job be protected. I think that was something that most people wanted, and we got it done.
Oh, it's very good news for our viewers at home. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to educate us on what the budget means. And I'd like to have you back in the future on other issues.
Thanks, John.
We'll see you soon.